Your son, Tunde, has been sentenced to death. Adebayo gasped, dropping her basket of goods. No, it can't be. Tunde stood in the living room, fists clenched and face set in a defiant scowl. His mother, Adebayo, looked at the shattered vase on the floor, her eyes wide with shock and dismay. The precious family heirloom, passed down through generations, lay in pieces, a testament to Tunde's latest outburst. Tunde, this boy, you will not kill me. Adebayo cried, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. What has gotten into you? Why do you always have to cause trouble? Tunde glared at her, unrepentant. It's just a stupid vase, Mom. Why do you care so much? It's not just the vase, she replied, tears welling up in her eyes. It's everything. The way you treat your siblings, the way you talk back to your father and me. This has to stop. Adebayo's words seemed to bounce off Tunde's hardened exterior. He was only 13, but his attitude was that of someone far older and much more cynical. He had become a terror in their small village, known for picking fights and bullying the younger children, especially his own brothers and sisters. I don't care, Tunde snapped, turning away from his mother. I'm tired of all of you. You're always on my case. Just then, his father, Ode, walked into the room, his face stern and unyielding. What is going on here? He demanded, surveying the mess and the distressed look on Adebayo's face. Tunde broke the vase and refuses to apologize, Adebayo said, her voice breaking. He doesn't listen to us anymore, Ode. We need to do something. Ode turned to Tunde, his eyes hard. Tunde, you need to respect your mother and take responsibility for your actions. This behavior is unacceptable. Tunde scoffed, crossing his arms. Whatever. I'm done here. With that, he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay there any longer. He was tired of the constant reprimands, tired of being treated like a child. As he walked through the village, he saw a group of boys around his age gathered near an old, abandoned warehouse. They were the notorious gang led by a boy named Sei, known for their delinquent activities. Tunde had always admired their defiance, their freedom from the constraints of family and rules. Hey, Tunde. Sei called out, noticing him. What are you doing out here? Had another fight with my parents, Tunde muttered, kicking a stone. Sei grinned, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Why don't you join us? We do what we want, when we want. No parents telling us what to do. Tunde hesitated for a moment, but the allure of freedom and camaraderie was too strong. He nodded, a reckless determination taking hold. All right. I'm in. As he joined the gang, Tunde felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. He knew he was making a dangerous choice, but at that moment, it felt like the only option. Little did he know that this decision would lead him down a path of no return, one that would test his courage, his morals, and ultimately, his very soul. The days that followed were a blur of reckless adventures and escalating trouble. Tunde found himself deeper and deeper in the gang's activities. They started with petty thefts and pranks, but it quickly escalated to vandalism and fighting with rival groups. Sei, always the charismatic leader, encouraged their worst instincts, praising Tunde's boldness and daring. Tunde felt a sense of belonging with the gang that he had never felt at home. They accepted him, admired him even, for his toughness and his willingness to stand up to anyone who crossed their path. The thrill of their exploits dulled the nagging guilt that sometimes crept into his thoughts, a small voice reminding him of his mother's tears and his father's disappointment. One evening, the gang decided to break into the local market after hours. It was Say's idea, as usual, a way to prove their dominance and score some quick cash. Tan's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear as they approached the market's back entrance. He knew this was far more serious than anything they had done before, but he couldn't back down now. "All right, Tand," Say whispered, handing him a crowbar. "You're up. Show us what you've got." Tan swallowed hard, gripping the crowbar tightly. He forced the door open with a loud creak, and they slipped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They moved quickly, grabbing whatever they could find, money from the register, goods from the shelves. Tan's hands shook as he stuffed his backpack, the reality of their crime sinking in. Just as they were about to leave, the sound of sirens pierced the silence. Panic erupted among the boys. Say cursed under his breath, looking for an escape route. "This way," he shouted, leading them towards a side door. Tan's heart raced as they fled into the night, the police close behind. They scattered in different directions, but Tan wasn't fast enough. A police officer tackled him to the ground, and the world seemed to spin as he was handcuffed and led to the waiting patrol car. The ride to the station was a blur of flashing lights and blaring sirens. Tan's mind raced with fear and regret. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. He thought of his parents, the look of heartbreak they would have when they found out. He had wanted freedom, but instead, he found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making. At the police station, Tand was processed and placed in a holding cell. The hours dragged on, each minute filled with dread. Eventually, the cell door creaked open, and he saw his father standing there, a mixture of anger and sadness in his eyes. "Tand," Ode said quietly, "what have you done?" Tand couldn't meet his father's gaze. Ode sighed deeply, "You need to understand that there are consequences to your actions. You can't keep going down this path." After his arrest, Tand was released into the custody of his parents, but he hadn't learned his lesson. Anger and bitterness festered within him, and he blamed his family for his troubles. One night, he made a desperate decision. Under the cover of darkness, he crept into his mother's room and stole her savings. Without a word, he slipped out of the house and disappeared into the night. The tension in the house was palpable as Adebayo confronted Tand in the kitchen. She had just discovered that he had taken her savings. "Tand, you took my money," Adebayo shouted, her voice trembling with fury. "How could you do this to your own family?" Tan glared back at her, defiant. "I needed it, Mom. You wouldn't understand." "Understand what?" "That you want to ruin your life. That you want to become a criminal." Adebayo's eyes were filled with tears. "You are throwing your life away." "I'm trying to survive, Mom." Tan snapped. "You and Dad are always on my case, always telling me what to do. I needed to get away from this suffocating place. This is not survival, Tand. This is self-destruction," Adebayo said, her voice breaking. "If you keep going down this path, you will end up dead or in prison." "At least then I'd be free," Tan muttered under his breath. Adebayo's face hardened. "If you leave now, don't think about coming back. You are on your own." Tan's heart pounded, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Fine. I don't need you or anyone else." He turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. As Tan hurried down the village road, he heard someone call out to him. It was old Mr. Olumide, sitting on his porch, his cane resting beside him. "Tand, where are you going now?" Mr. Olumide asked, concern etched on his wrinkled face. "I'm leaving, Mr. Olumide. I can't stay here any longer," Tunde replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The old man shook his head slowly. "Running away won't solve your problems, boy. It will only create new ones." "You don't understand," Tunde said, frustration evident in his tone. "I need to get away. I need to find my own path." Mr. Olumide's eyes softened. "The path you're on now leads to destruction, Tunde. Go back home. Apologize to your mother. It's not too late to change." Tunde clenched his fists. "I can't go back. They'll never forgive me. They love you, Tunde. More than you realize. Don't let pride and anger lead you to ruin," Mr. Olumide pleaded. Tunde hesitated, his resolve wavering for a moment. But the bitterness and anger inside him were too strong. "I'm sorry, Mr. Olumide. I can't." With that, Tunde turned and continued down the road, ignoring the old man's desperate calls. As he disappeared into the darkness, Mr. Olumide sighed deeply, knowing the boy was heading toward a future full of pain and regret. Tunde's descent was swift and brutal. He fell in with a new, more dangerous gang and started using drugs to escape the pain and confusion that haunted him. The gang's activities escalated from petty theft to armed robbery. Tunde became a hardened criminal, far removed from the boy who once caused mischief in his village. One fateful night, during a particularly daring heist at a wealthy merchant's home, things went horribly wrong. The police arrived before they could escape, and a violent shootout ensued. Tunde was captured, his accomplices either dead or on the run. Tunde sat in the cold, grey cell of the maximum security prison, awaiting his trial. His mind was a storm of regret, fear, and despair. The trial was swift, and given the severity of his crimes, the judge handed down the harshest sentence, death by firing squad. Adebayo was at the market when she received the call. Her heart sank as the officer on the other end of the line delivered the news. "Mrs. Adebayo, this is Officer Dapo. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your son, Tunde, has been sentenced to death." Adebayo gasped, dropping her basket of goods. "No, it can't be. Please, there must be some mistake." "I'm sorry, ma'am. The evidence was overwhelming. His execution is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Adebayo's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, sobbing. Ode, who was nearby, rushed to her side. "What is it, Adebayo? What's happened?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "It's Tunde," she choked out. "They've sentenced him to death." Ade's face went pale, and he clenched his fists in a futile attempt to control his emotions. "We have to see him. We have to go now." The prison guards led Ode and Adebayo to a small, stark room where Tunde was waiting, chained to the table. His parents looked at him, their hearts breaking. "Tunde," Ode said softly, tears in his eyes. "Why, son? Why did you do this to yourself?" Tunde couldn't meet their gaze. I thought I could find freedom, but I only found more chains." Adebayo reached out, her hand trembling as she touched his cheek. "Oh, Tunde, my boy. We never stopped loving you, even when you went astray. We always hoped you'd come back to us." Tunde's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. Dad. I was so angry, and I made so many mistakes. I wish I could take it all back." "We forgive you, Tunde," Ode said, his voice breaking. "We forgive you." The guard stepped forward, indicating that their time was up. Adebayo leaned in, kissing Tan's forehead. "We love you, Tand. Always remember that." The next morning, Tan stood in the courtyard, facing the firing squad. His legs were weak, and his heart pounded in his chest. He thought of his parents, their forgiveness, and their love. As the squad took their positions, Tan closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He whispered a final prayer, hoping for peace. "Ready," the officer barked. "Aim." Tan took a deep breath, accepting his fate. "Fire." The shots rang out, and Tan's body crumpled to the ground. The sound echoed through the courtyard, a tragic end to a wayward path. Far away, in their home, Ode and Adebayo held each other tightly, mourning the loss of their son but finding solace in their forgiveness and the hope that his troubled soul had finally found peace.